So Graham Platner, he's officially out of the Maine Senate race after being accused of sexual assault. And now you're seeing with the race to replace him underway, you've got some right-wingers arguing that Democrats, they knowingly backed a monster while at the same time insisting that they must keep that monster in the race. And that's even as others, including none other than Donald Trump himself, having in some way come to Platner's defense, seeming to suggest that the sexual assault allegation against him could just be made up. And while of course, at least right now, it is just an allegation, but it's widely been seen as a credible one, it's only the latest that's called Platner's character into question. You've had him kind of just facing scandal after scandal since launching his candidacy last summer, including over social media posts dismissive of sexual assault, a tattoo that he had resembling a Nazi symbol, sexually explicit text messages that he sent to other women after he married in 2023, and allegations of toxic and abusive behavior by ex-girlfriends. And while his polling it stayed pretty strong here, and high-profile supporters, including Senator Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, stood by Platner through those controversies, on Monday, that changed after one of those ex-girlfriends came forward with a new allegation, where she claimed that Platner had not only mistreated her, but he had raped her, entered her home drunk and uninvited, and forced himself on her despite repeated objections. And so you then had a lot of the Dems who had supported him up to this point turning on him, calling on him to withdraw from the race. Right, and then the next day, you had another one of the women who had already accused Platner of getting physical with her, coming forward and claiming that he had removed condoms without consent during sex, which is actually a practice known as stealthing that's also classified as a form of sexual assault in several countries. Though Platner, throughout all this, he's denied the allegations of non-consensual behavior, and his campaign suggested that the allegations were politically motivated. But ultimately, Platner decides there's really no coming back from this, at least in this election cycle. And while several of his closest advisors reportedly pleaded with him to strike a conciliatory tone in the announcement terminating his Senate campaign, Platner reportedly told them that he'd only move forward with the announcement if he were allowed to say everything that he wanted. And it at least seems like he probably did that, because his video announcing his decision is more than 11 minutes long. And you have it starting off with Platner again denying the allegations and then blaming the establishment and the system for essentially his campaign's demise.
A corporate media system and the political establishment got to act as judge, jury, and executioner. There is a reason that this is happening now. This was the last week to try to get me off of the ballot. And that's why this is occurring. It's not the false allegations, though, that have brought us to where we are. It's the fact that they are being used by the political establishment to put structural pressure on us. We live in a political system that is not built for normal people. It is a system that is built structurally to make sure that movements like ours cannot flourish. That if they begin to succeed, they can be crushed.
And then from that, you had Platner turning his attention to the process to replace him, saying that the process needs to be reflecting the will and the values of the people that built this movement, and adding,
decisions should not be made in back rooms by people in places of political power. Party apparatchiks are not the ones to make these decisions. These decisions need to be made in the open by the people of this state, the people who got us here. This is exactly the kind of political system that everyone voted against on June 9th. And for that reason, we need to be assured that it is going to be open and democratic as we move forward.
But with all that, right now, it's really not clear exactly how this process is going to work. All we really know right now is that the Maine Democratic Party, they have until July 27th at 5 p.m. to decide, and they say that they're going to do this through a nominating convention held sometime before then. And actually with that, another big thing is that before announcing his suspension, Platner reportedly told campaign staff on a call that he had, quote, asked for assurances from the Democratic Party that they will ensure a process for a replacement nominee that respects the will of the voters who voted for a different kind of politics. But then with that, you had the head of the Maine Democratic Party claiming that Platner's team had repeatedly reached out to them in an attempt to, quote, put their thumb on the scale of the selection process, and adding, we have repeatedly reiterated to Graham Platner's team that they have no role in determining our next Democratic nominee. And while that may be true, you also have a lot of people saying that they do need to be very careful with who they do pick, and also how they get that pick, because it would be a mistake to go with someone who doesn't represent the same values that Platner professed. And so now, what you're seeing, and by no means is this universal, you have a lot of his supporters, or maybe former supporters, they're rallying behind former state senator Troy Jackson. While a lot of people noted that his kind of most recent thing is that he had a failed bid for governor, he came third in the Democratic primary, you have many saying that he might be kind of the perfect mix of a politician and a working class populist. Right? He's won elections before. He was actually Maine Senate president for a bit, and you've had him fighting for and running on lower prescription drug prices, passing universal school meals, protecting union jobs, expanding rural health care, delivering property tax relief, safeguarding the environment, and passing laws that would put power back in the hands of working Mainers. And his most recent post after announcing that he's throwing his hat in the ring was, I'll be a vote for Medicare for all in the U.S. Senate. Susan Collins, on the other hand, recently helped advance $990 billion in Medicaid cuts so the richest Americans could get another tax break. But also, he's definitely not the only one. Or you've got other candidates, including but not limited to Nirav Shah, who's a former public health official who finished second in the Democratic primary for governor, and Secretary of State Shanna Bellows, who finished fourth in that primary. And then also, in the meantime, you have a lot of people, including many on the right, sort of echoing Platner, suggesting that this is the establishment at work, getting rid of a candidate that they think is no longer viable. So you're seeing people like conservative commentator Tommy Lahren being among those comparing this to what happened with the Dems in the last presidential election, writing, well, Maine Democrats, Biden, Platner, saying the party of democracy props up shit candidates and pulls the rug and reinstalls as necessary. Platner is trash, the Democratic Party is fraudulent. Though then also with this, you had a lot of the conservative commentators also pretty much accepting the sexual assault allegation, actually arguing that the Dems were willing to accept this and Platner's other controversies if they thought they could win. With, for example, the Republicans' Twitter account posting, every Democrat that endorsed Graham Platner endorsed a rapist, and then adding in another post, Democrats are okay with predators like Graham Platner until their poll numbers are down. And you also had Laura Trump telling Fox News,
we've known who Graham Platner is for a long time, but the Democrat Party was willing to look the other way, all because they want so desperately to retain power and regain power. How can you possibly trust a party that is basically willing to lie to you and tell you that this guy is okay?
And, with all that, of course, there are a lot of people who are looking at Platner's whole history now and questioning why so many people stuck by him. But then with that, one, you have a number of people saying, hey, the first specific sexual assault allegation against Platner, it was made public on Monday. It's now Thursday. He's out of the race. But then also maybe more notably, two, your father-in-law is Donald Trump. And for the rest of the Trumplicans, the person you back every single day, you bend over backwards for to defend, is Donald Trump. A man who's in the Epstein files God knows how many times, has been accused of sexual misconduct multiple times over decades, and who's been found civilly liable for sexual abuse, which the judge clarified in practical everyday terms was rape. That's not me just throwing out a random thing. That is a judge saying it. And he is an administration that's filled with people like Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who not only has tattoos that have been linked by some to Christian nationalist and white supremacist movements, but also has been accused of sexual assault. There were those allegations detailed in a police report, which didn't lead to charges, but he later paid the woman $50,000 reportedly to stay quiet. And of course, with all this, I'll note it, in all of these cases, with the notable exception being of the case in which a court of law found Trump sexually abused a woman, those are allegations. And that actually brings us to how another whole wave of reactions have kind of been not just focused on pointing that out, but really giving weight to the idea that the accusations against Platner may be made up. And there, you had Trump, for example, saying,
it's really a question of whether or not you believe the woman. A lot of people say big falsehoods.
You've also had the investigative outlet Dropsite News reporting that the first woman who accused Platner also told Politico that she had messaged him that night that she needed her glute massage. And so you had the Dropsite News reporter arguing that omitting this relevant detail was a shocking breach of journalistic ethics. Although there, you had others quickly firing back that this sounds more like an attempt at victim blaming, with one person writing, was she also wearing a short skirt? But ultimately, that is where we are right now, right? And there's a lot that it's going to have to play out from here. And that ranges from the accusations against Platner, if more comes out, if Platner outside of, running, defends or tries to defend himself even more. And then separate from that, who is the replacement? How are they picked? What's the public reaction to it? And I mean that both from the left and right, because as devastated as you're seeing a lot on the left right now, and there's even just like a lot of people angry at each other. On the right, something that you're seeing, though, it's not a lot on the surface. It's kind of like reporting about behind the scenes. They're fucking furious. So much money and time has been spent on digging up stuff on Graham Platner, getting ready to kind of destroy him before November. And now you have a number of them kind of seeing there being a risk of what if someone copy pastes Platner's public policy, but they don't have all the baggage. And so seemingly one of the big things we're going to be focusing on right now is how the Democrats get the nominee. That's going to be a big part of the make or break in the situation. But for now, we'll have to wait and see. And of course, in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts.